we start out with our CT scan data, and you can see the glass beads right here is used to stitch the upper and lower denture that the patient has in their mouth, and the corrected vertical dimensional occlusion. Usually this is an AI feature that auto stitches this for you, so you don't have to do it manually. And this would be here corrected vertical. We also take full face photos, which I'll show you in a second, and then eventually we'll go ahead and start mapping our mandibular nerve, which is quite simple to do, and often again, AI features will generate the nerve for you. Once we'll do this, we'll start to plan our implant positions for the upper and lower arches, and then we'll need to go through advanced segmentation for the upper and lower, being able to turn the DICOM data of our upper and lower arch from CT scan data into segmented maxillary mandibular arches. And now this is a STL format that you can 3D print in your office. And so this data is now aligned. So this is her bone, and then the gap between would be the soft tissue of the upper and the lower, as you can see here. We're going to go ahead and plan our implant positions. This is all done in advance, just to kind of give you an idea. And then once we'll plan our implant positions, we'll also plan our lateral pins to stabilize these on our surgical guide. So you can see our implants are planned in the upper arch and also in the lower arch. And here's another view from this side scan. So posterior implants, anterior implants, avoiding the maxillary sinus on both sides. Place these in the second bicuspid, a little bit more to the distal. This is all trying to maximize our AP spread, and then from here on out, all we have to do is plan our bone reduction guide if that's what we'd like to do, and it looks like we will bone reduce. These lateral pins are going in between the implants, as you can see here from this view. You can see the implants in between and the lateral pins in between the implants. So at this point, we're going to start manipulating, and let's start looking at the step-by-step process on how to do our bone reduction. So what we want to check out initially is our restorative place. We're using all the facial aesthetics protocols and desired implant final restoration, FP1, FP3. And then we're going to go into figure out where the implant platform is to try to get a nice even restorative plane, and all the implants going through the denture on the top and the bottom. Typically lingual to the incisal edges if possible. Obviously, if it's 9 millimeters of bone before our implant platform, we will be doing some sort of bone reduction guide for this case. Since it is bone reduction, we have already the segmented jaw and the lateral pins through the guide. We're going to go ahead and use our cut tool. See our pins through the guide. We're going to form a surgical guide on top of it, and then in the software use the cut tool to be able to reduce these bone and the surgical guide at one opportunity, and then this will hold. This is what we're left with from our lateral pins to stabilize this guide. These are on the posterior, stabilizing the posterior segments. This is the anterior segment being stabilized. Then we'll export all this data into Mesh Mixer, and then this is what you export: the guide tubes and this bone reduction guide. And then we're just going to add a tube to increase the strength of the guide and also prevent these from floating. And then once you're finished with that, this is what your final guide looks like. It's going to be your complete full arch guide. Subtracting the implants and the pins, you can also print that, and you have an idea of how much bone reduction you're going to need, and that's the bone that's going to be reduced. And then basically the same thing for the maxilla. This is your pre-op advanced bone segmentation, bone reduce with the bone reduction guide. This is the full arch, fully guided guide, and this is the amount of bone that we're going to reduce from her, upper and lower. And then this is the actual patient. So this is the 3D printed upper bone reduction guide or lower bone reduction guide and the surgical guide. And on the upper arch, bone reduction guide and full arch guided surgery. This is what it looks like. Full flap reflection, bone surgical guide in place. You can see how much bone we're going to reduce this bone. And then after it's reduced, we can remove this guide, put on a separate guide to place our implants through the surgical guide. That's what it looks like here. Torquing our multi-unit abutments, and then place our multi-abutment healing abutments, and then do the same thing for the upper arch. Bone reduction guide, that's after the bone reduced, surgical guide in place, implants go in, suture. So rinse and repeat essentially for the upper.